Friends, one of the phrases that caught my heart today from the scriptures was from the second reading of the Epistle of Hebrews, how God is shaking up the world. God is shaking up the world. And not just the earth, but the heavens too. And when I think on that, when I reflect on that, I see that God, throughout all of Scripture, keeps shaking up the world. From Adam and Eve to Jeremiah, calling a boy to be a child, to be the prophet of Israel. And in today's gospel, Jesus is shaking up the world. Jesus is shaking up the world by causing holy trouble or good trouble, causing people to wake up to what's happening around them. In today's gospel, Jesus is preaching and sees a woman who is something's wrong with her back. She's bent over, and Jesus heals her. And instead of excitement, Jesus gets in trouble. You can't be healing on this day. It's not right. No, this is wrong. You can't do this, right? And I was shocked. I was like, Jesus just did a miracle, and you're worried about whether it was, at the right time or not, right? It was shocking. I think back on a saint in the church that did not appreciate either when God caused some holy trouble. And I first heard about him when one of the past deans, Jim Monroe, preached on him a while back. And I couldn't help but go and do some more research. And his life was even more exciting than that sermon. That was St. Ambrose. Do you guys know St. Ambrose and his story? Well, it's not very well known, but he has a heck of a story. And he was very, very surprised and very, very shocked and very, very upset when God shook up his life very unexpectedly. St. Ambrose lived in the late 300s, and the year that specifically I'm talking about is the year 374. 374. And Ambrose was what today we would consider a cross between a sheriff and a district attorney of the city of Milan in Italy. And Ambrose was there to keep the peace. And he was really good at the job. And the people loved him because he was very passionate about justice. And not just justice for the rich, but justice for all. And people really admired him for it. Well, on that year, 374, there was an election for a bishop. And in that time, there weren't Democrats and Republicans. There were Catholics and Arians. And they were both Christians, but they did not like each other because they disagreed on a concept of the Trinity. And this caused war and trouble and lots and lots of problems and fights in the city of Milan and throughout Europe. And Ambrose was there at the election to keep the peace. Well, people were arguing back and forth as to who should be bishop, a Catholic or an Arian, and nobody seemed to like the candidates. And then suddenly, a voice of a child, legend says, cried out, Ambrose should be bishop. Ambrose is actually on his horse, and he kind of laughs. And then suddenly, people in the crowd, yeah, Ambrose should be, but Ambrose is bishop, Ambrose. And suddenly the entire crowd started shouting, Ambrose, Ambrose, Ambrose. Ambrose is shocked. And he probably does what any of us would do. He runs away, right? Gallops away to his house. But what happens? The crowd follows him home, gathers around his house, and starts screaming, Ambrose, Ambrose, Ambrose. Ambrose said, all right, I need to prove to them that, I'm not a holy guy. I'm not so I just imagined him kind of doing like a John Wayne out the door and says, if you don't stop, I will arrest everybody. And the people shout out even more, Ambrose, Ambrose, Ambrose. So I think, Ambrose does what I think, any of us would do. He runs away again. He runs to a friend's house and hides out at the friend's house, and guess what happens? The crowd follows him there. Ambrose, Ambrose, Ambrose. So he tells his friend, listen, I need to prove to them that I'm no good. We're going to throw a house party and invite all the seedy characters in the city to show that, I'm a bad guy. I shouldn't be a bishop, right? And so he throws a party and invites all the seedy people from the city of Milan. And then he comes out and says, see, I can't be bishop. Look at who all my friends are. What do you think the people shout? Ambrose, Ambrose, Ambrose. All right, what do you think he does now? He runs away again to another friend's house, hides out there, and refuses to come out. 3 days, people are camped outside the house, yelling, Ambrose, Ambrose, Ambrose. And to the point, it's causing such a disruption that the emperor of Rome, the Roman emperor, Valentinian, writes a letter to Ambrose saying, Ambrose, look at all of the servants. Clearly you're being called to be a bishop. Come out. And it's not just a request, it's an order. And so Ambrose, receiving the letter from the emperor, decides to come out the door. And finally says, okay, I'll be your bishop. And the people grab him and bring him to the church and baptize him on a Monday, confirm him on a Tuesday, ordain him on a Wednesday, consecrate him bishop on a Thursday, and install him on Friday. I can just imagine Ambrose, Friday night, all alone. People are finally home. His hair is still wet from being baptized. I mean, what am I supposed to do now? Right? Talk about God shaking up the world, right? Shaking up Ambrose's life. He didn't want any part of that. But there he was. And Ambrose decided to go to work and try his best. And 1,650 plus years later, we still remember him for having done 3 amazing things. One is, he was a unifier. You remember that division between the Arians and the Catholics? He, instead of forcing everyone to choose one side or the other, he decided to open up the church that there was enough space for everyone. And even though he leaned towards the Catholic theology, he worked with Arian bishops from other cities and brought peace to the people of that time. The second thing he's known for was that he was amazing at what priests call pastoral care. Pastoral care is visiting people, sitting with people, caring for them when they're ill. Like, he cared for the people. And again, not just the rich people, but he would go out and visit the poor. He would feed people. He would visit the sick. Talk about being good at something. 1,600 plus years later, you're still remembered for having done that really, really well. Wow, I hope so. I hope that 1,600 years from now, people say, that Jose, he was pretty good at caring for people. And the third thing he's remembered for is that he was passionate about caring for the poor. And one of his first kind of orders to the church at that time was that the church was to go out and help feed and take care of the poor. And at that time, bishops were more political figures than religious, right? And so it was a bit rare that the bishop wrote something like that. And the churches didn't know what to do. I mean, you think, churches are really good at that, but not at that time period. And so they wrote back to Ambrose saying, we don't have the money to do that. We don't have the money to do that. Ambrose got so tired of hearing that that he wrote back and said, okay, I hear you. Well, then you see all those gold ornaments and the collection plate that's gold and the chalice and the paten and all these things that are gold, the candle holders, melt them down and use that to feed the poor. And to this day, that passion for caring for the poor has been institutionalized as part of the church. And so, God is shaking up things. God shook up things in 374, and I think God is shaking up things in 2025 as well. Except Ambrose is long gone, right? Ambrose did his work. But people are still shouting here and in our community, but they're not shouting for Ambrose anymore. I think they're shouting, Christ Church Cathedral, Christ Church Cathedral, Christ Church Cathedral. I hear it. Since I started on March, I hear that every day. People are shouting out in our community because they're in need, they're alone, they're in need us in support, pastoral care, safety, and they're crying out, Christ Church Cathedral, Christ Church Cathedral, Christ Church Cathedral. And I wonder, what will we say as a church? Right? What will we do as a church? It's scary. And like Ambrose, I feel tempted to say, what am I supposed to do about this? God, St. Andrew's and St. Peter's are down the street. We sure, what are we to do? What can we do? But God is inviting us into that holy work. God is inviting us. And like Jeremiah, God is promising to provide everything we need. God just needs a yes. God just needs a step forward. God just needs a bit of bravery, a bit of foolishness to say, here I am, Lord. And God can do miracles with that. In today's gospel, Jesus is shaking up that town, shaking up that synagogue, shaking up the world, reminding us about the power of compassion, getting into holy trouble, and inviting us into that holy trouble. Before we say, oh, those people 2,000 years ago, they're a bit crazy, right? Being upset about healing in the synagogue, what's that all about, right? But I don't know if the world's changed that much. We no longer care that much about the Sabbath, but we still put things, we still say excuses, right? There are so many things that people can be healed from today, right? In our very own country. And sometimes the message they get is, yeah, but you don't have the right insurance, right? Imagine 1,600 years from now, people will say, they would heal them because of insurance, right? Or sometimes, people will say, oh, people are hungry. In our very own community, people are hungry, going to sleep hungry in our very own streets here. And we have the power to feed them, right? But, oh, you don't have enough money, so you don't get to eat. And we choose to throw out food from supermarkets, tons and tons of food from supermarkets, instead of feeding the hungry. As a society, we choose that, right? Or it's chosen for us. So I kind of see, if Jesus were here right now, I wonder what kind of holy trouble he'd invite us to. What kind of holy trouble he'd lead the way in. What kind of things can we do? What kind of good can we do in the world that would make people outrageous? Friends, it is holy trouble that we are invited to. And I pray that, like Ambrose, after the fourth time, we have the courage to accept that invitation and to see where God leads us. Amen.
Amen. On page 9,